5 assists. Tough turnaround shot. Gets to the goal.
Knicks have beaten the Wizards 7 straight times.
4. Lin for the win. Got it.
For 2 weeks, he was the best player on earth, the NBA's ultimate one-hit wonder. Basketball has always had streaky players, guys who catch fire for a game or two, then fade back into the shadows. But no one had a run quite like this. An undrafted guard out of Harvard, Asian American, overlooked, nearly out of the league, suddenly became the face of basketball. Magazine covers, New York Times headlines, Sports Illustrated, Slam. In the mecca of basketball, his story wasn't just news, it was a global phenomenon. Even Time magazine named him one of the 100 most influential people on the planet. And the stakes couldn't have been higher. One bad game, and his NBA career might have been over. The Knicks had dropped 11 of 13, battered and desperate, their season slipping away. They needed a savior. Somehow, he was ready. Off the bench, 25 points and 8 assists. The next night, 28 and 8. Then came Washington, where he blew past the number 1 pick John Wall and threw down a dunk to seal a 3rd straight win. But the moment that shook the league came under the bright lights of Madison Square Garden, a showdown with Kobe Bryant and the Lakers. He torched them for 38, drilling a dagger jumper right in front of the Lakers bench. And just when it seemed like it couldn't get any bigger, Valentine's Day in Toronto. Game on the line. He waved off the screen, stared down the defense, and buried a cold-blooded 3 at the buzzer. It was Linsanity, a flash of brilliance that set the basketball world on fire. In his first 5 career starts, the Harvard kid turned Gotham hero scored 136 points, the most by any player since the ABA-NBA merger, and led the Knicks to 10 wins in 13 games, rescuing a season on the brink. He went from crashing on couches, mistaken for a team trainer by Madison Square Garden security, to back-to-back Sports Illustrated covers. And here's the twist. While most one-hit wonders disappear, he built something lasting. Nearly a decade in the league. The first Asian American to win an NBA championship. Tens of millions earned. Not bad for a player who was never supposed to make it past training camp. To understand how impossible this rise really was, you have to go back to where it started. Before the magazine covers, the bright lights of Madison Square Garden, and the global headlines, there was just a kid from Palo Alto. The son of Taiwanese immigrants raised in a middle-class home, dreaming of a game that rarely welcomed players who looked like him. No elite scouting services, no 5-star rankings, just a skinny guard with a high basketball IQ, relentless work ethic, and a belief that somehow he could belong. To understand how unbelievable Linsanity really was, you have to go back to where it all started.
People love an underdog, and boy, oh boy, is this kid an underdog.
Jeremy Lin wasn't born into a basketball dynasty. His parents, Ji-Ming and Shirley Lin, emigrated from Taiwan and settled in Palo Alto, California, about as far from the NBA pipeline as you could get. Both stood just 5'6", and while Jeremy's grandfather reached 6 feet, nothing about his family suggested a future pro. It was his father who introduced him to the game at the local YMCA, teaching his sons the fundamentals. His mother played her part too, helping establish a national junior basketball program in Palo Alto and working with coaches to balance academics with athletics. From the very beginning, the odds were stacked against him. Asian American players had virtually no footprint in the NBA. Yes, Yao Ming became a global superstar, but he was a 7'6" giant who had been groomed for the game since childhood. So massive, he even made Shaq look average. Others, like Jordan Clarkson and Jalen Green, shared Filipino heritage, but both had American fathers. Jeremy Lin was different. He was a full-blooded Asian American, born in California to Taiwanese immigrants. A skinny, undersized point guard who, at first glance, didn't resemble an NBA prospect at all, fighting not just defenders on the court, but the stereotypes that American-born Asians faced across the country. And yet, he made people notice, at least locally. At Palo Alto High, Lin led his team to a 32-1 record and the California Division II state championship in 2006. They upset Mater Dei, a powerhouse program stacked with future Division I recruits.
Much more of a formality when they played Mater Dei High School. Southern California schools dominate the rankings. They're the powers at B. Palo Alto out in the suburbs, not so much.
Lin averaged 15 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds, and 5 steals that season, proving he could do a little bit of everything. But when college recruiters looked his way, they didn't see a star. No Pac-10 schools offered him a scholarship. Instead, Lin sent out his resume and highlight DVDs to Ivy League programs, UC Berkeley, and his dream schools, Stanford and UCLA. The responses weren't flattering. Pac-10 teams told him he could walk on. Stanford, right in his backyard, didn't even blink. Harvard showed interest, but as an Ivy League school, it couldn't offer athletic scholarships. Lin applied the traditional way, with no guarantees. His first year at Harvard didn't turn heads. Assistant coach Bill Holden admitted Lin looked like a Division III player, and another coach flat out called him the weakest guy on the team. But Jeremy adjusted. By his sophomore season, he was averaging double figures and earning all Ivy recognition. By senior year, he had become one of the league's best, a 2-time All-Ivy selection who ranked near the top in nearly every statistical category. Then came the night that put him on the map. December 2009, on the road against number 12 UConn. Their roster was loaded with future pros, including Kemba Walker. Lin didn't just hold his own, he dominated. 30 points, 9 rebounds, 3 steals. For one night, he was the best player on the floor. But even that wasn't enough. To scouts, he was still too skinny, too slow, too unathletic. The Ivy League wasn't the Big East or the ACC. To them, he was just another good college player who would never survive in the NBA. Draft night, 2010. 60 names were called. His wasn't one of them. Undrafted. Overlooked. Forgotten. But Jeremy Lin wasn't finished yet. For most undrafted players, the dream ends on draft night. But Jeremy Lin wasn't ready to give it up. He first turned heads in the 2010 Summer League, going toe-to-toe with number 1 pick John Wall, and holding his own. That performance earned him a partially guaranteed deal with his hometown team, the Golden State Warriors. On paper, it was a feel-good story, the Bay Area kid coming home. As a rookie, he played just 29 games, averaging 2.6 points in 9 minutes a night. His biggest highlight? Garbage time minutes, where the crowd cheered just because he was a local kid. Behind the scenes, he was bouncing between the Warriors and their D-League affiliate in Reno, trying to prove he belonged. The following season, Golden State waived him. Houston picked him up, then cut him before the season even started. Twice discarded before his second year had even begun. By late 2011, his NBA career was hanging by a thread. He'd been undrafted, waived, and overlooked at every stop. He had no guarantees, no security. At one point, he even admitted he was sleeping on friends and family's couches, not knowing if he'd have a team the next week. But fate wasn't done with him yet. In December 2011, the New York Knicks, desperate for depth at point guard, claimed him off waivers. To most, it was a throwaway move, the 12th man on the roster, someone who'd probably be gone in a week. When the Knicks signed him, it barely made the transaction wire. To most, he was nothing more than insurance, a body at the end of the bench. Even Madison Square Garden's security guards didn't recognize him, sometimes mistaking him for a trainer instead of a player. But the Knicks were desperate. Their roster was riddled with injuries. Amari Stoudemire was out. Carmelo Anthony was banged up. Starting point guard Baron Davis was sidelined with back spasms. The team had dropped 11 of their last 13 games, and the season was slipping away. Lin himself was just days away from being cut. His career and the Knicks season were hanging by a thread. And yet, Linsanity almost never happened. On December 31st, 2011, Lin logged just 3 minutes and 51 seconds. He missed his only shot, turned the ball over twice, and racked up 4 fouls while being tormented by rookie Isaiah Thomas. The worst game of my career, Lin later admitted to The Athletic. A month later, with the deadline for contracts to become guaranteed looming, Lin faced a do-or-die moment. On February 4th, 2012, against the New Jersey Nets, it was simple: perform or be cut.
My agent called me before the game and he said, "This is probably your last game in the NBA. If they put you in, you have to play Jeremy Lin basketball, and if you go down, you must go down swinging."
What followed didn't just save the Knicks, it made history. That night, Lin exploded for 25 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists on Deron Williams, one of the league's premier point guards. Madison Square Garden erupted. 2 nights later, he poured in 28 more against Utah. Then came Washington, where he blew past #1 pick John Wall and hammered home a dunk that had the Knicks bench flying out of their seats. On February 10th, the Lakers came to town. Before tip-off, Kobe Bryant shrugged, admitting he didn't even know who Lin was.
I don't even know what he's done. I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
By the end of the night, he knew. Lin torched the Lakers for 38 points, slicing through the defense and drilling jumpers under the Garden's brightest lights. And just when it seemed like the moment couldn't get any bigger, Valentine's Day in Toronto. Score tied, clock winding down, Lin waved off the screen, stared down the defense, and buried a cold-blooded 3 at the buzzer. It was official: Linsanity. In his first 5 career starts, the Harvard kid poured in 136 points, the most by any player since the ABA-NBA merger, and led the Knicks to 10 wins in their next 13 games, rescuing what looked like a lost season in the mecca of basketball. As the first American-born NBA player of Chinese or Taiwanese descent, his unprecedented run wasn't just about saving New York's season. It became a cultural touchstone. He went from crashing on friends and family's couches to back-to-back Sports Illustrated covers, and even a spot on Time's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. This wasn't just a player having a good run. It was a cultural earthquake. The Knicks, a team stuck in mediocrity, suddenly had the hottest story in sports. Madison Square Garden sold out night after night. Ticket prices skyrocketed. Merchandise sales exploded. Fans wore number 17 jerseys in every arena. But it wasn't just New York. It was the entire world. For the first time, an Asian American player wasn't just in the NBA, he was dominating it. Cable ratings in Taiwan and China spiked. His games were broadcast live across Asia, sometimes drawing more viewers than the Super Bowl. In a league long searching for global icons, Lin became an instant ambassador, and the proof was right there in Madison Square Garden. Even Lin's parents became minor celebrities, shown on national TV as they watched their son take over the world's most famous arena. The headline said it all: Super Nintendo, the mighty Lin. All he does is Lin.
Who scores more tonight?
I'm going with my guy, Jeremy Lin, right here.
Because you might do that.
All he does is Lin.
He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated 2 weeks in a row, the first player since Michael Jordan to do that. Time magazine named him one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Everyone wanted a piece of him. Talk shows, endorsement deals, magazine covers. Even President Obama weighed in, calling his story inspiring. In just 2 weeks, Jeremy Lin went from being waived twice in one season to becoming the most talked about athlete on earth. It wasn't just Linsanity, it was a global movement. For all the magic of Linsanity, reality was always waiting around the corner. As the weeks passed, defenses adjusted. Scouting reports piled up. Teams trapped him on pick and rolls, forced him left, and dared him to shoot under pressure. The turnovers mounted. And on February 23rd, under the national spotlight against the Miami Heat, the ride hit its first wall. Miami's swarming defense hounded Lin into 8 turnovers and just 1 made field goal. A brutal reminder of how quickly the NBA humbles you. Then came the injury. In March, Lin tore the meniscus in his left knee. Just like that, the ride was over. Linsanity had lasted only 26 games. But for New York fans, it felt like the air had been sucked out of Madison Square Garden. And the injuries weren't the only problem. Inside the Knicks locker room, tension was brewing. Carmelo Anthony had been sidelined when the streak began, and when he returned, the offense wasn't his anymore. Mike D'Antoni leaned on Lin's pick and rolls, while Melo thrived in isolations. The chemistry was awkward. The media fed the narrative, and the locker room grew divided. Everyone wasn't a fan of Lin being the new star, Amare Stoudemire later admitted. Jeremy was becoming a star, and I don't think everybody was pleased with that. Reports of Carmelo's jealousy only deepened the rift. As one source told ESPN, Carmelo's dream was to go to New York and be the man, and all of a sudden this little guy nobody's ever heard of is living his dream. By season's end, Lin was sidelined. The Knicks were bounced in the first round by the Heat, and the fairy tale had ended almost as quickly as it began. Then came the final gut punch. That summer, the Houston Rockets offered Lin a 3-year, $25 million poison pill deal, a contract Melo publicly called ridiculous. To the shock of New York fans, the Knicks refused to match. The magic in New York was gone. But Jeremy Lin's NBA story was far from over. Most one-hit wonders vanish as quickly as they appear, but Jeremy Lin did something rare. He cashed in on the moment, and more importantly, he stuck around. The summer after Linsanity, the Houston Rockets offered him a 3-year, $25 million contract, a deal structured so heavily on the back end, it was nicknamed the Poison Pill. For an undrafted player, it was life-changing money. For Lin, it was validation, proof that those 2 magical weeks could buy not just fame, but stability. His years in Houston weren't Linsanity all over again, but they were solid. He started most nights, averaged 13 points and 6 assists per game, and became a dependable rotation guard. He wasn't a superstar, but he was a pro. From there, Lin bounced around the league, with the Lakers, Hornets, Nets, and Hawks. Everywhere he went, he carved out a role. Sometimes a starter, sometimes a spark off the bench. Always a fighter. But in 2017, disaster struck again. On opening night with the Brooklyn Nets, Lin drove to the rim, landed awkwardly, and immediately knew something was wrong. He had ruptured his patellar tendon, one of the most devastating injuries a guard can suffer. It robbed him of his trademark burst, his quick first step, and his ability to finish in traffic. Many players never come back the same. Some never come back at all. Lin fought his way back. It wasn't easy, and he never fully regained the explosiveness he once had. But he refused to quit. He returned to the league as a role player, adjusting his game, leaning on experience, craft, and leadership instead of pure athleticism. And through it all, he kept beating the odds. He entered the league undrafted, overlooked, doubted at every step. Yet by the end of his NBA run, he had played nearly a decade in the league,
earned nearly $65 million in career salary,
and left a mark most undrafted players could only dream of. His run in New York may have been a flash in the pan, but Jeremy Lin turned that flash into a career. In the NBA, one-hit wonders usually disappear. A hot week, maybe a good month, and then they're gone, forgotten, in a league that moves fast. But Jeremy Lin was different. He wasn't just an undrafted player who stuck around. He was an Asian American point guard, something the NBA had never seen before. From day one, he carried a burden no box score could capture. Scouts labeled him too small, too slow, not athletic enough. He simply didn't look the part. As former Rockets GM Daryl Morey later admitted in Michael Lewis's The Undoing Project, 2016, Houston's analytics model rated Lin as a mid-first-round talent, ahead of the 2010 draft, 15th overall. But the front office ignored the data. To them, he didn't pass the eye test. An Asian American guard? It seemed impossible. A year later, when the Rockets began tracking the speed of a player's first 2 steps, the data told a different story. Lin had the quickest first step of anyone measured. He's incredibly athletic, Maury admitted. But the reality is that every person, including me, thought he was unathletic. And I can't think of any reason for it, other than he was Asian. Opponents sometimes targeted him with slurs and taunts, yet Lin kept showing up.
We would play in games, and a couple times people would be like, yo, take your ass back to China, or like, you're a Chinese import, or whatever. When I got to college, it just like got crazy. It was just like, you chink, can you even open your eyes? Can you see the scoreboard? Just like crazy stuff. Not just be like, dude, like, what is going on?
He didn't just survive those moments, he thrived in spite of them. Most players who come out of nowhere fade back into obscurity. Lin turned his moment into a 9-year career. Nearly 500 NBA games, 8 teams, over $65 million in salary. Money almost unheard of for an undrafted guard. And then came the crowning jewel. In 2019, with the Toronto Raptors, Lin became the first Asian American player to win an NBA championship. His role was small, but the symbolism was enormous. For millions of fans across the globe, it was proof that someone who looked like them could stand on basketball's biggest stage. Even after that, Lin wasn't done chasing the game. He played a season in the Chinese Basketball Association, then returned to the G League for one last shot at the NBA. He delivered, finishing as the league's 7th leading scorer with 19.8 points per game on 50.5% shooting, including 42.6% from 3, along with 6.4 assists and 3.2 rebounds. But the call never came. I did what I needed to do, Lin later said, but no matter what I do, I don't think it'll ever be enough. His story is rare because it's not just about basketball. It's about representation, about resilience, about a player who showed millions of Asian and Asian American fans that they too could belong on the biggest stage. Most one-hit wonders vanish. Jeremy Lin became a trailblazer. For most players, a 2-week hot streak would be nothing more than a trivia question, a flash in the pan, a remember when moment. But Linsanity was different. It wasn't just about points and wins. It was about what it represented. For Asian Americans, Jeremy Lin shattered barriers that had stood for decades. He gave kids who had never seen themselves on an NBA court someone to point to and say, "He looks like me." Arenas in Taiwan, China, and across Asia erupted in the middle of the night, fans staying up just to watch the Knicks. Linsanity was the first time, long before Crazy Rich Asians, that Asians found something we could collectively celebrate and rally around, journalist Jeff Yang recalled. At those games, the number of Asian Americans in the arena quadrupled. Everywhere you looked, they were holding signs, screaming, wearing his name and number. Lin became a unifying force, a must-see event even for people who had never cared about basketball. Unlike Yao Ming, the 7'6" phenom from China groomed for stardom long before the NBA, Lin stood 6'3", 200 pounds, born and raised in the US, chasing the same like Mike dreams as countless kids across the country. For a lot of us, Jeremy Lin represents us, said Phil Yu, co-author of Rise, a pop history of Asian America from the 90s to now. We've been that guy who's completely underestimated, not just in sports, but in school, at work, in everyday life. A lot of the discourse around Jeremy Lin was, how did nobody see this coming? And we knew the answer. We knew why. And for New York, a city built on underdogs and outsiders, Lin became the perfect symbol. An overlooked kid, counted out at every step, suddenly lighting up Madison Square Garden, the biggest stage in basketball. Even today, fans call Linsanity one of the most electric stretches in NBA history. Not because of the numbers, though the numbers were historic, but because of the feeling.
Jeremy Lin's name may never hang in the rafters, and his stats may not land him in the Hall of Fame. But for 2 unforgettable weeks, he united a city, inspired a generation, and reminded the world why we fall in love with sports in the first place. The legacy of Linsanity isn't that it ended. It's that it proved even the most unlikely dream can come true.
Jeremy Lin's story was never supposed to happen. An undrafted guard from Harvard overlooked at every step, carrying the weight of stereotypes that told him he didn't belong. And yet, for 2 weeks in 2012, he lit up Madison Square Garden and the entire basketball world with a run so improbable, it felt like a movie. But the true power of Linsanity wasn't in the box scores. It was in the kids who saw themselves in him for the first time. In the communities that filled arenas and living rooms around the world, united by the sight of an Asian American guard dazzling on the biggest stage. The stats faded, the headlines moved on, but the impact remained. Because what Jeremy Lin proved was bigger than basketball. He proved that dreams don't care about where you're from, what you look like, or what the odds say. And that's why, long after the shots stopped falling, the legacy of Linsanity still echoes.